On Monday morning, on the 39th floor of Orion Core Systems, where multi-million-dollar decisions were made behind spotless glass doors, Logan Pierce, Executive Vice President, walked into the office with the composed stride of someone well accustomed to life at the top of the pyramid. His light grey suit fit snugly. Polished leather shoes caught the morning winter light streaming through the blinds, and the steaming latte in his hand made him look like he had just stepped out of a Forbes cover shoot. Logan was not loud, but his presence always made the air in the office tighten, as if everyone had to breathe more cautiously. In the brief seconds between the elevator and his desk, he had already scanned the floor, passing avoiding glances, reluctant nods, and a tight-lipped smile from the administrative assistant. To Logan, this was the proper form of acknowledgement, and silence felt natural, because only the weak needed noise to assert their position. Only today was not like any other morning. A black woman stood in the corner of the room, silently pushing a trash cart, her hands swiftly collecting bits of paper near the conference table. She wore a navy blue uniform faded by time, her hair tied neatly back, her face bare of makeup, her expression calm, unflinching, neither avoiding nor seeking eye contact. She seemed invisible in that space of glass and steel, a familiar fixture no one needed to notice. Logan paused for half a second as she stepped near his private office area. He frowned, set down his coffee, and walked over to her. His voice was flat, unlowered, cutting through the quiet. "Excuse me. This area is off limits to janitorial staff during office hours. You should return to the service floor." Receiving no immediate reaction, he tilted his head, gaze sharpening. "Or perhaps someone forgot to explain the rules to you." The woman said nothing. She didn't look confused, nor did she appear confrontational. Just unnervingly calm. She looked at him for a brief moment, a gaze free of fear or anger, as if silently measuring something, then gave a small nod, stepped back twice, and pulled out her phone. She walked over to the window overlooking the city, dialed a single number, and lifted the phone to her ear. Her voice, barely audible to anyone else, carried 8 simple words. "Emergency board meeting, 39th floor, now." She hung up, slipped the phone into her jacket, and returned to tidying up, saying nothing more. Logan didn't understand what had just happened, but he didn't care to. To him, she was just an odd cleaning lady, probably from an outside contractor who hadn't been properly briefed. He returned to his desk, opened his laptop, and prepared for the quarterly executive meeting, where he planned to present numbers that might lead to a few light departmental cuts and some leadership replacements. He didn't know that he himself was already on that list, and the woman he had just told didn't belong there was the only one who could finalize that decision. When the antique clock on the wall struck 9 o'clock, the familiar ding of the elevator echoed down the hall. No one in the room realized that what was arriving wasn't just a group of people, but an entire reversal of power, set in motion by one insult delivered to the wrong person. 3 hours before Logan Pierce uttered those disparaging words, Selena Grant pulled into the underground parking lot on level B3 of Orion Core's headquarters. The silver sedan she drove had no VIP plate. Its interior was plain, a deliberate choice over her usual SUV with a driver. Today, there was no assistant, no schedule, no thick coordination binder sent by the admin team via Outlook every morning. Today, she came as an observer, quiet, anonymous, and free. Selina exited the ground floor elevator, wearing a black coat that fell just to her knees, dark slacks, and her hair neatly tied low. Rimless glasses covered half her face, and a grey mask blurred the recognizable features of the powerful CEO among the early morning crowd. She walked past the front desk, where a new employee, someone who had never seen her before, barely glanced up from his keyboard, not bothering to offer a greeting. Selina didn't take offense. That was the point of her disguise. She wanted to see with her own eyes what happened when the image of the founder was no longer visibly present. She entered the pantry on the 12th floor, a hub for strategic project teams. A group of employees stood chatting around the coffee machine, animatedly gossiping about the new senior executive from Boston, Logan Pierce, who's rumored to only hire people like himself. Selina said nothing. She poured herself a cup of tea and stood near the fridge, listening in on what seemed like harmless banter, but revealed far more about the system than any survey could. A brown-skinned woman shared how she had been reassigned to support the tech team simply because she didn't fit the image of strategic clients. Another whispered that internal training sessions were being quietly phased out for departments not within Logan's trusted circle. Selina discreetly took notes on her phone. Each seemingly small anecdote was a worrying fracture. Although the previous quarter's internal survey had reported acceptable levels of workplace satisfaction, these real fragments painted a different picture. Something in the company's culture was rotting, quietly but unmistakably. And what chilled her most was realizing that by granting Logan partial control of the organization, she had inadvertently enabled a layer of culture where people like who she once was were being edged out of the core. As Selina stepped back into the hallway, a 60-something janitor gave her a quiet nod. She returned the gesture with a faint smile, recognizing that people like him, the ones most often overlooked, were precisely where the truth began to surface. Selina continued her quiet journey through the critical floors of Orion Core, each step like a pulse check on the very heart of a system that, on paper, she still led. But the deeper she went, the more she felt the weight of unfamiliarity pressing in, slowly eclipsing the original vision she had once built the company upon. A foundation rooted in fairness, creativity, and respect. Now, those pillars seemed replaced by silence, guarded glances, and an unspoken order governing every behavior from the shadows. On the 18th floor, home to research and development, she paused near the elevator and listened to a conversation between two young employees preparing for a project presentation. One of them muttered, "Let Evelyn's team do the talking part. We'll just support from the back. You know Logan prefers it that way." The other shrugged. "Yeah, you have to look the part to be allowed to speak. I don't look market enough." A passing comment, but to Selina it cut like a blade. These truths never appeared in performance reports or boardroom briefings. They only surfaced in hallways, in pantries, where guards were down and honesty slipped through. She veered off into a service corridor leading to infrastructure engineering, a space rarely visited unless something went wrong. What she saw there made her stop cold. Two janitors were scrambling to clean a spill from a cooling tank leak. Nearby, a group of young engineers stood watching, laughing, snapping photos as if it were a joke. One of them mimicked a southern accent, aiming it at the black janitor. If he were a real engineer, that water wouldn't be on the floor. No one intervened. A few even chuckled along. Selina stood silently in the hallway shadows, a chill crawling up her spine. She didn't step in, not because she couldn't, but because she knew she had to go further, dig deeper. She turned toward the service elevator, a lift used only by logistics, maintenance, and support staff. A faded sign read, "Internal use only, no access to executive floors." But to Selina, this was exactly the entrance she needed. Because sometimes, to truly understand an organization, one doesn't need to look from the top down, but to step in through the side door, where the light doesn't reach, but the truth never hides. The elevator doors closed behind her with a dull metallic groan, and the journey to unmask the true face of Orion Core had only just begun. The 5th floor of the Orion Core building housed the logistics and internal services offices, a parallel world entirely detached from the sleek ambiance of the executive levels above. There were no gleaming glass walls or cool white LED lights here, only grey concrete walls, slip, resistant tile floors, and duty rosters taped to the walls with old masking tape. Selina stepped into the janitorial office just as the morning shift was handing over. A man with warm brown skin, a solid build, and gentle eyes was carefully distributing cleaning cloths and task assignments. That was Miguel, someone who had worked at Orion Core since the early days when the company still rented shared office space in Fulton Market. Selina removed her mask and approached with a soft smile. Miguel froze for a moment, immediately recognizing her. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, quickly replaced by a look of caution. "Mr. Grant, what are you doing here like this?" he asked, his voice dropping almost to a whisper. She held a finger to her lips and replied quietly, "I want to enter the executive floor as someone no one notices. I need your help. Just a simple cleaning shift." Miguel studied her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "If you're sure this is what you want, I'll make arrangements." 15 minutes later, Selina was dressed in a janitor's uniform, loose slacks, a navy polo shirt, and a guest service tech badge clipped to her chest. In her hands was a supply cart stocked with gloves, floor cleaner, trash bags, and disinfecting wipes. No one looked at her twice as she stepped into the service elevator alongside another employee hauling a box of printer paper to the 39th floor. When the elevator doors slid open, she emerged into the executive reception area, where cold white light and the signature scent of smoky sandalwood perfume wrapped around her like a silent warning. This was a place for expensive suits and polished leather shoes, not people pushing trash carts. Selina kept her head down and steered her cart toward the right, hand corridor, heading toward the meeting rooms and workspaces of the leadership team. Every step felt heavy, not physically, but with the weight of memory and loss. She was entering the very heart of power she had once built, now as a complete stranger. Her only goal, to see whether the culture she had once taken pride in protecting had anything left worth saving. And at the far end of that hallway, a door stood slightly ajar. Beneath the soft yellow light, a man stood with his back turned, the familiar grey suit, the voice sharp and clinical. "I told you before, you should know your place before walking into a room where real change happens." Selina didn't need to see his face to know who it was. Logan Pierce, the man she had once trusted, now preparing to crush everything with a twisted version of the authority she had unknowingly given him. But she did not stop, because this was the moment she needed. A test, a naked truth, and if necessary, a fire strong enough to burn through the mask that had settled over the company's heart. The executive meeting room named Orion West sat at the end of the 39th floor hallway, equipped with double-layered soundproof glass doors and its own air filtration system. It was once the place where Selina signed her first investment contracts, the room where she mapped out Orion Corps' future on a humble whiteboard. Now, entering that space dressed in janitorial uniform, she felt like an outsider, stripped of identity and authority by the very system she had built. But she did not falter. She quietly pushed the cleaning cart into a corner of the room, blending into the background like something invisible and expected. Logan Pierce stood at the center of the room, arms folded across his chest, speaking in a tone that was steady, but soaked in contempt. He was addressing a group of young employees preparing for a presentation. "We need to maintain appearances. Let's not have any of those messy internal reports leaking. And remember, I don't want anyone from support staff stepping into the meeting room while clients are present, unless they look like one of us." He chuckled, a short, dry sound. "Not like her." His words hung in the air just as his eyes drifted toward Selina, who was silently wiping down the glass board nearby. Selina looked up. Logan took a step closer, scanning her from head to toe as if appraising an object out of place. "You knew?" he asked coldly. "Who assigned you this morning's shift? This floor isn't for contractors. This is a strategic zone." He didn't wait for an answer, just stepped back slightly and turned to his assistant, letting slip a sentence that no one in the room would soon forget. "I swear, this company's getting sloppy. Can't even keep the executive floor clean and consistent anymore." The room fell silent for a few seconds. A few employees exchanged glances, torn between speaking up or staying quiet. But no one said a word. Selina quietly bowed her head and continued her work as if she had heard nothing. But in her mind, every word was being recorded, not with a phone or a tape recorder, but with the resolve behind a decision that would be made in less than an hour. For Logan, it was just another morning, a minor incident not worth remembering. But for Selina, it was a defining moment. There was no longer any doubt. She had seen enough, and the abuse of power had reached its peak. What she had feared was now real. The company wasn't drifting off course because of competitors, but because the very people in charge were corroding its values from within. And now, it was time to act. Not as an invisible employee, but with the authority of an awakened founder. As Selina pushed the janitorial cart out of the Orion West meeting room, she no longer felt a mix of disappointment and anger. Everything was now as clear as midday light, no further evidence needed, no more room for excuses. What she had just witnessed was not the failure of an individual, but the complete manifestation of a corrupted power system, where original values had been systematically replaced by prejudice and complacency. And when an entire system is broken, the solution is never just a fix. It demands a full-scale reset. She stepped into a shadowed corner near the emergency stairwell, removed her mask, unclipped the temporary name badge from her chest, then pulled a phone from her back pocket. No hesitation, no second thoughts. She tapped a single button labeled Exec Override. The line rang for less than 2 seconds before a voice answered, "Carmen Velasquez, HR. Go ahead." Selina spoke without pause. "Emergency board assembly, floor 39, in 30 minutes. Pull all of Logan Pierce's operational data from the past week, including all anonymous feedback from the executive floor." Carmen paused briefly. "Understood. I'll initiate stealth meeting protocol. Should I bring in legal?" Selina replied instantly. "Call Daniel and Eleanor. I want every pillar in place." As the call ended, Carmen's phone triggered 3 internal systems: Orion Alert, the emergency meeting protocol; Vault Log, the behavioral data aggregator tracking emails, calendars, and HR activity; and finally, Silent Flag, a special signal to building security, switching them to active standby. All systems engaged in less than 26 seconds. A fail-safe Selina had built with the hope that it would never have to be used. At that moment on the 20th floor, Daniel Wu, head of legal, received the red alert along with one directive: restore order. No explanation, no delay. He stood up, closed his laptop, threw on his blazer, and headed to the elevator without a word. On the 27th floor, Eleanor Davis, chair of the board, abruptly ended a meeting mid-sentence, telling her assistant only, "Selina called. Someone's about to lose their seat." Meanwhile, on the 39th floor, Logan was still presenting confidently to the executive team, discussing restructuring personnel to optimize brand image. He had no idea that beyond the glass doors, powerful footsteps were already moving silently toward him. Not to listen to what he had to say, but to witness the price he was about to pay. Because the system Selina once built was no longer dormant. And once awakened, it would not merely correct, it would rebuild everything from the ground up. 9:45 a.m. The doors of the Orion West boardroom swung open once more. But this time it wasn't a janitor who entered. It was the 3 most powerful figures at Orion Core. Daniel Wu, his eyes sharp behind a thin pair of glasses; Eleanor Davis, calm and resolute as ever; and finally, Carmen Velasquez, holding a thick folder in her hand and walking with the determined pace of someone about to deliver a verdict. Together, they stepped into the room, and the air instantly thickened into silence. Mid-level managers instinctively stepped back, while Logan furrowed his brows, stood up, and crossed his arms with a look of guarded surprise. "What's going on? We're in the middle of a meeting," he said, his voice tinged with irritation and the unshakable confidence he always wore. Eleanor didn't answer immediately. She pulled out the chair at the head of the table, sat down, and placed in front of her a document printed with an executive-level label, Internal Culture Investigation Level 1. Daniel took the seat beside her and opened a laptop already connected to the main display. The room's screen instantly lit up with a series of internal data visuals: Logan's email interaction charts, negative feedback statistics, a color-coded map of communication silos within the company, and most prominently, anonymous quotes citing discriminatory remarks, authoritarian conduct, and abuse of power. Logan began to sense something was deeply wrong. He frowned at the screen, then turned to Daniel. "What is this? Who authorized releasing internal data without clearance?" Daniel said nothing, only tilted his head slightly to one side. At that moment, the doors opened again. This time, no one in the room moved or made a sound. Selina Grant walked in. No more janitor's uniform, no cleaning cart. She wore a long black blazer, slate, grey trousers, her hair tied neatly in a high bun, and low-heeled shoes clicking evenly against the granite floor. No introduction was needed, no greeting spoken. Her presence alone silenced the entire room. Logan stepped back, disbelief etched across his face. "You're?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Selina stopped at the head of the table, gently set down her highest-level executive badge, and spoke, her voice calm and clear. "Selina Grant, founder, the one who brought you into this company, and the woman you asked this morning to leave the floor reserved for those who create change." No one in the room exhaled. The managers at the back lowered their heads. Logan stood frozen, his face pale, eyes wide with panic. In that instant, every dismissive smirk, every insult, every mocking remark he had made came back at him like blades reversed in flight. Selina looked around the room, once the heart of creativity, now repurposed as a chamber for discreet abuses of power. She didn't shout. She didn't slam the table. She simply said, "I'm not here to repeat the words from this morning. I came to ask one simple question. Do you still believe you deserve a seat at this table?" And for the first time since being appointed Executive Vice President, Logan Pierce had no answer. The silence in the Orion West boardroom stretched on like an unspoken sentence. Logan remained standing, one hand loosely gripping the edge of the table, his back rigid, though his eyes had begun to wander. In front of him was no longer an anonymous janitor, but Selina Grant, the woman who founded, steered, and saved this company from collapse 3 times. The very name he once referenced in press conferences as a symbol now looked directly at him with an unwavering gaze, needing no raised voice to assert her authority. Selina pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat, her fingers gently interlaced. She spoke slowly, each word peeling back the layers of disguise that the system had wrapped around the man standing before her. "I've been observing you for the past several months, not through reports. Numbers can be dressed up. I've been watching through anonymous feedback, through behavior in meetings, and through the eyes of those who no longer feel safe stepping into the executive elevator." She tilted her head toward Carmen. "Please read the summary of internal complaints." Carmen opened the file, her tone calm but firm. Excerpt from the June survey. "I was asked to step out of the team photo because I wasn't dressed to Logan's standard. Female communications employee. I was transferred out of product engineering because my skin wasn't fit for high-end clientele. A black employee on the development team. Logan told me to lose weight if I ever wanted to attend investor meetings. Product assistant." She paused. All of these statements align with audio recordings from meeting room cameras and internal logs we've reviewed. Daniel Wu switched the display to secure mode, revealing Logan's outbound email logs, many flagged by the system for inappropriate and discriminatory language. He added, "We've also cross-checked recent personnel decisions. A pattern emerged, removals and transfers involving individuals who don't fit a certain appearance, background, or skin tone." Selina looked up at Logan, now visibly shaken, beads of sweat forming on his brow, hands clasped tightly as if to steady their tremble. "You have the right to speak before I make my decision," she said, not harsh but devoid of softness. Logan muttered something incoherent, then fell silent. He knew anything said now would only make things worse. Selina turned to Eleanor Davis, chair of the board. No lengthy discussion was needed. Eleanor gave a single nod. Under Article 4, Section 3 of the Executive Code, any senior leader found guilty of abusing power and damaging internal culture is to be immediately suspended. Carmen produced a sealed envelope containing the official suspension notice. Daniel disabled Logan's system access on the spot. Within 30 seconds, his employee badge was deactivated. At that moment, Logan's phone let out a soft ping. The message read, "Internal access revoked. Please contact Human Resources." Selina stood, looking at Logan one last time. "You once said I didn't belong on this floor. You were right, but not because I wasn't qualified, because you were never worthy of this place." Then she turned and walked away, leaving behind a room heavy with silence, and a man who had just lost everything in the shock of his own downfall. Moments after Selina left the boardroom, Logan collapsed into the leather chair at the corner of the table, as if gravity had suddenly doubled its pull on his entire body. His face had lost all color, his lips pressed into a tight line, and his eyes stared blankly into the void, as if searching for something that had just slipped through his fingers: power, reputation, or perhaps simply the familiar feeling of control. But none of it was there anymore. There was no assistant rushing in to smooth things over. No apology email queued up and ready to send. No one offered a word of defense. He was alone, completely, in a system that had decisively turned its back on him. Less than an hour later, the colleagues who once patted him on the back at the coffee counter suddenly became busy with meetings. Strategic partners let his calls go to voicemail. His LinkedIn page, once a constant stream of professional triumphs, began receiving waves of sarcastic comments from anonymous accounts. Worse still, a video clip from the internal cameras, capturing the moment he insulted the janitor, was leaked on a forum dedicated to exposing toxic workplace culture. Within hours, the footage had spread across platforms beyond anyone's control. Logan called a close friend working in media to try to manage the crisis, but the response was swift and final. "No one wants to be dragged into this. This isn't just a personal mistake anymore. It's a symbol of a larger revolt against elitist workplace culture." He reached out to a law firm he had worked with in the past, but they too stayed silent. The feeling of isolation began to tighten around his throat like an invisible rope. With no access to the system, no business card, and no position left to claim, Logan had become an empty name in the very structure he once manipulated. Back at his high-rise apartment, alone, Logan sat motionless on the sofa, gazing out over the city. The distant lights blinked as always, but to him, they now felt harsh and alien. He considered writing a public apology, but every sentence that came to mind felt hollow, not because he didn't know he was wrong, but because for the first time in his life, he didn't know where to begin. Late in the day, his phone buzzed. It was an email, not from colleagues or friends, but from the Orion core system itself. The subject line was brief: "Permanent lockout. Logan Pierce account. All data will be retained for audit purposes. No message, no farewell." A cold, absolute, irreversible ending. And in that stillness, Logan finally understood what it meant to fall, not from a title, but from the illusion of power he once believed was permanent. 1 week after the suspension of Logan Pierce, the Orion core building seemed to operate as usual. Lights on at 7 a.m., elevators packed during rush hour, meeting rooms fully booked, and urgent emails flying back and forth. But to those paying close attention, something was shifting, though not yet fully formed. The janitorial staff no longer averted their eyes when entering executive areas. Young employees who had been removed from presentation teams were now being called back into strategic planning sessions. Most noticeably, the Orion West room, once a stronghold of silent power, was now left open, transformed into a space for open discussions, even for those without VP titles. Selina Grant did not hold a press conference or issue a grand statement. She did not respond to interview requests, write a blog post, or send out an internal newsletter titled New Direction. Instead, she chose to act. Every morning, she spent 30 minutes seated in the lobby on the ground floor, the space everyone had to pass through, regardless of title. No assistant, no appointments. Anyone could approach and speak. A small gesture, yet powerful enough to dismantle the invisible wall she had not realized had formed. She also established an independent group called the Echo Committee, 12 members from various departments whose sole responsibility was to listen and forward workplace culture concerns directly to her, bypassing all levels of management. The group was guaranteed absolute anonymity. Within 2 weeks, they received 113 responses, ranging from minor complaints about harsh lighting in workspaces to proposals to reform the performance review system, to prioritize skills over appearance. Miguel, the man who once helped Selina carry out her undercover plan, was now appointed to oversee internal culture. He was given the authority to redesign shared spaces, lead microaggression training sessions, and attend monthly leadership meetings as an informal advisor. For Selina, this was not just recognition. It was a quiet declaration that those once considered the lowest were, in fact, the most accurate measure of a company's culture. The story of the morning Logan Pierce was dismissed, spread through the tech industry like a wake-up call. Many companies began re-examining their internal policies. On social media, people started referring to that event by an unofficial title, "The Day the Janitor Spoke." But Selina paid no mind to hashtags. The only thing she cared about was ensuring that from now on, no one would have to bow their head because they felt they didn't belong in a place built in part by their own hard work. Because sometimes saving a system doesn't require changing everything. It just takes the courage to name what is wrong, and to begin again, from a moment that may have seemed like just a simple insult aimed at the wrong person. The story of Selina Grant is not just a stunning reversal between a founder and an abuser of power. It stands as a clear testament to a simple truth that many modern organizations have forgotten. Culture does not live in presentation slides or slogans on the wall. It lives in how we treat the most vulnerable when no one is watching. And a true leader does not need to assert authority through words, but through the ability to redefine fairness in places where it once seemed impossible. If you believe that respect is not a reward, but a starting point, hit like to help spread that value to more people. Don't forget to subscribe and continue following us through real stories where justice does not need to shout to be heard. And if you have ever seen yourself in Selina's eyes, even just once, leave a comment with these 3 words: deserve much more.